This week on Capitol Report, the push to get younger voters to the polls this election season.
Making it super accessible to people, I think like the younger generation really could make a difference.
Also, the new effort to get college kids to also work at the polls.
It's about giving young people a front row seat to the democratic process.
Plus, weathering the storm, a new report addresses the state's readiness to handle flooding.
It's a real wake-up call, I think, for the state of Connecticut.
And Governor Lamont asking the tough questions during Connecticut Day at the Big E.
What's the difference between sorbet and ice cream?
Order up. Capitol Report starts now. It's milk, Governor. Hey, welcome to Capitol Report. I am Tom Dutchick, and I'm so glad you're spending part of this Sunday morning alongside the power panel. The mayor of Bloomfield, Connecticut, Danielle Wong, is here.
Good morning.
And we call it the pros and the Joes today. Joe Arasimowicz.
Joe times two. Joe squared.
Former Speaker Joe Paletta from the 68th in Watertown, State Rep Republican. Welcome, Joe. Huh?
Thank you for having
me. Johnny Mack is with us as always.
I am.
Senator.
Happy fall.
All right, guys. Happy fall. All right, guys, let's get into it. More than 40 million members of Gen Z, including Cerulli, will be eligible to vote in November. Those are voters who are from the age 18 to 27. Boy, wouldn't that be great? And last week, UConn's Gamble Pavilion was buzzing with activity to get young Huskies registered to vote during the school's career fair. Younger voters make up a huge block of the electorate. There's renewed interest in the 2024 race among students, and state leaders, of course, also recognize how important it is to get them to show up and vote. Watch this.
I feel like not a lot of people had been excited for a while, but I think as it's coming near, especially with the recent presidential debate, a lot of people are starting to get excited. A lot of people didn't realize we're going to have an early polling location, so I think that might also get some interest.
If you don't vote, you can't complain. There's issues that are important to young people. There are, and the best way for them to express their support for those issues oftentimes is by voting for candidates that'll represent them and represent them well in Hartford or in Washington.
And this year, early voting is also making it easier for students at UConn to cast their ballots. A polling location has been set up right at the campus bookstore. For the DoorDash generation, it's all about convenience. Watch this.
Like last year was really tough to go out to because only one day for voting is very hard, because with all classes and you have to go to the center in Mansfield, so it was really tough to get out there. So this year is going to be much easier.
Joe, Paletta, how does the Republicans engage young voters? I heard an interesting fact today that if you're in the early stage of Gen Z, almost half of your life was a Trump presidency. Yeah. They don't remember 9/11. To old guys like me, that's amazing to think about.
Absolutely, and where they get their news from. Most of it is coming from TikTok, from Twitter, from Instagram, and the ads and whatnot. So that's where most of the young folks in that generation are getting their news from, and I think that's where they're kind of shaping their views from.
I think and for the young voters I talk to, it's they look at DC, they look at the political debates, and they see chaos. They don't see anything that really they want to pull into. I guess you get some on either side that feel really strongly, but the folks in the middle are like, why? Why do I want to get involved in this? It just all seems so dysfunctional. And my message is, you're the ones that are going to need to make the difference. You guys can reshape how we have politics. You guys can demand what you want from your elected officials more than anybody else, but you got to be involved in the process.
Do you make sure your football players get involved?
Well, I don't ask them if they register to vote. I urge them to register to vote, and I urge them to really investigate the candidates. Don't just look at a party label. It only goes so far. Get to know the candidate. Ask them the tough questions. Send them the email. Pick up the phone. Do they respond? Are they really going to work for you?
Yeah, Republicans traditionally have not done as good a job as Democrats reaching out to college-aged voters. There was a time where Connecticut Democrats wanted to impose a download tax. And I'm like, that's an issue right there, because all of my kids were on their, apps and other things. I'm like, hey, the Democrats want to tax those when you use it, and we as Republicans don't. But we need to find those issues. Yeah. The interesting thing about this voting at UConn in Mansfield is this could be very important in some elections. The 29th State Senate District, which Mae Flexer currently represents, is a district that outside of Mansfield is a Republican district. And if the Republican candidate and Republicans want to win, they have to go to Mansfield, they have to go to Yukon and turn some of those kids around.
Yeah, 20% of our population is roughly 18 to 29 years old. So catching early voters, you know, in colleges and where they are, just really enhances access to democracy. That is what democracy is all about, right? Access to make your voice heard. And so I applaud Yukon for establishing a second polling location, so it makes it easier for the kids to go to and vote, right? A lot of them don't have cars. They're going to have to take and
you
plan
make them
a weekend.
lifelong voters.
You make them
That's
lifelong
right.
voters. You start early. Exactly, John. Exactly.
All right, guys. Hey, so voter registration day was also an opportunity for the Secretary of State to announce a first-of-its-kind civic initiative to have college students serve as poll workers. It's called Next Gen Elections. Here's Stephanie Thomas on why this is needed.
Not only are there poll worker shortages around the nation and here in Connecticut, but more and more registrars of voters are retiring. And through the program, 40 students from 11 colleges and universities across Connecticut will learn firsthand all the details around how our elections work.
Well, anytime you got cheerleaders in a photo op, I think that's a good photo op. But, you know, good for her. You know, my mother's in her 90s, and she's still a poll worker. I mean, you go into poll workers, that's basically all you see is older people who have been doing it for generations.
Yeah, it's in Bloomfield, right? It's the same group of people that we have to tap and pull from. And so getting a younger generation involved, getting them trained up and understanding the process just helps promote the directions, the guidance to voting. And so I think it's a good thing, and we have to continue to do that in our towns, not only in the colleges, but make sure our towns and cities are equipped.
Right, and also I think it brings more people into the fold, right? And you know, you see the same people year after year coming to volunteer at the polling places, but now it brings this new populace of people into the fold. And for those folks that might not know how elections work, I think it actually is a good thing. So I applaud the Secretary of State for that initiative.
Yeah, Tom, you hit it right on the head. I've been voting at the same polling location up until the last.
You've seen the same women.
Same women here, and I love seeing them, and we always greet each other, but we know each other in first name.
You see typewriters and rulers. Right?
You actually do, and I'm always looking for the old party checkers, which are gone now. Everything's done on iPad, but we do need to freshen it up. And I also think it's important for them to trust the democratic process of voting. There's been so much doubt cast, and these younger people are just hearing it, whether it's TikTok or social media, to be in the room, to see when the tallies come out, see how the double check happens, so they have the faith in our democracy, which I think right now is really teetering.
Yeah, and where are the political science professors around our Connecticut colleges? Our friend Jonathan Wharton, tell your classes, make this a class, you know.
Give them credit.
Yeah, give them credit, make it an assignment, go to your town, work as a poll.
That's a great idea.
Great idea. Hey, so on the heels of some of the most devastating flooding Connecticut has ever seen, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities rolled out a massive flooding report that had been in the works for a few years. The big takeaway? Connecticut needs to make greater investments in infrastructure to mitigate flood risks, better standards on climate resiliency, and that Connecticut is not doing as much as its neighboring states when it comes to flood control projects. The engineering firm that CCM hired to do the study says the findings should be, well, a wake-up call. Watch this.
Flash flooding like we saw in August, as extreme as that was, you know, I think the underlying take-home is that that can happen anywhere in Connecticut. I mean, it really is a situation where you don't have to be along the coast. You don't have to be down by the river to be impacted in a serious way by this intense rainfall-driven flooding. And wherever there's impervious surfaces, wherever there's development, there's a potential for that kind of flooding.
You could fix flooding in one town. That water's going to go someplace, and is it fair just to push it? Look, I contained it in one town, but if it's rolling downhill, what does that do to the next town? So there's a lot of things that have to be done regionally, and I think that's where the COGS in coordinating can have a significant impact in kind of a capacity of scale.
169 towns and cities, big, small, medium. You know, we've got to figure out what works or what options are available and what we can afford.
And Platt, it's not only houses and washed out roads, DeSantis Farm in Watertown. A lot of agricultural damage is part of this flooding. You know, you don't think about that, but that's big damage.
Absolutely. So I was very pleased to see the Lieutenant Governor come into Watertown and visit the DeSantis farm. And, you know, on a further note, we had the governor in the district visiting towns like Oxford, visiting towns like Monroe and Southbury that got washed out. You know, it was unfortunate that our current U.S. House Rep, Jahan Hayes, was not there, and she was in Chicago. But the governor and lieutenant governor did a wonderful job at letting the residents and the businesses know that we're here to help. And now there's some programs set in place. I'm very happy that the FEMA disaster declaration was approved. But there are people that are crying out for help, and they're very nervous about the future of their structures, of their businesses. And I'll just use one more example. Claridis Village down in Seymour, 13 of the 15 businesses are still closed due to flooding. And we have to do more to educate homeowners and businesses on flood insurance. It's a big problem right now.
Well, the Congresswoman was exactly where she needed to be to make sure that the process of cataloging those items and the damage was in the process. And the president was there, and she was actively having meetings. I was there in Chicago while she was working for her district. So it doesn't stop because of the photo ops that we have the opportunity to take in Connecticut. So she was just where she needed to be. Additionally, like, flooding keeps me up at night and all the mayors at night, right? And so this is something, I'm glad that CCM is sounding the alarm, but we have to address our aging infrastructure. You know, when it comes to building the sustainability of the buildings, it's not in place. And I actually fear for middle to lower size population towns because they don't have the resources and the personnel and the expertise to kind of chase after those dollars on the federal level. And so we have to kind of figure out how to coalesce. So again, the organizations and the regional organizations like CCM are going to be critical in making sure that the local municipalities have the access to the funds that they need to on that end. So this is something that we really have to dig in deep.
Yeah, as someone who grew up on the shoreline, we're used to erosion, shoreline erosion. Sea level is going to cause a whole nother problem over the next, say, 50 to 100 years. But this is really not a shoreline problem anymore. It's really all across the state.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Countdown to Election Day is on the way. Up next on Capitol Report, we'll break down a few interesting House races with News 8's political contributor, my pal, Mike Cerulli. We get back. Do not go away. Good job, guys.
What about if your paper goes?
Less than 30 days, can you believe it, until voting begins in Connecticut. We thought it'd be a good time to check in on some of the most closely watched state legislative races. And that's why we have guys like News 8's political contributor, Mike Cerulli, on the team. Hey, so Mike, we've talked about on the show about some of the most competitive state Senate races. You broke them down. Have those changed much?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, that list of the most competitive state Senate districts really hasn't changed. The three main ones being Ryan Fazio's seat, Tony Wong's seat, and Lisa Seminara's seat. And you'll notice with all of those, we're looking at Republicans on defense and Democrats on offense. On the House side, some of the geography is the same, but what you see a lot more of is Republicans on offense looking for pickups.
All right, Mike, give us the rundown. I know you got your eyes on a few. Help us out here.
Yes, so let's start in the towns of Vernon, Ellington, and East Windsor. That's the 57th district. There, incumbent Democrat Jamie Foster defending her seat against Republican Jen Zen. This was a district decided by less than 100 votes this last time around. Could be a squeaker this year again. From there, we'll head due east for Torrington and the 65th House District. Another Democrat, Michelle Cook, a well-established incumbent, facing a challenge from Republican Joe Canino. Cook was unopposed in 22, but in the last presidential election, she had about a 3-point race, so Republicans keeping a close eye there as the hometown kid tries to beat the well-known deputy speaker. And finally, let's head all the way down to Fairfield County. There's a lot of competitive races there, but one I've got my eye on is the 149th district. First-term incumbent Democrat Rachel Khanna and Republican Tina Corpus facing off for control of what could be a district that really is a bellwether. It includes part of Greenwich and part of Stamford. Khanna captured the district after decades of Republican control. She and Nick Simmons now looking to turn Greenwich solid blue with a hold and a flip, Tom.
Good stuff, Mike. So now I want to get the two Joes, the house guys, involved in their thoughts in the races. Hey, which races are you guys watching? Paletta, let's start with you.
So, Mike did a great job summarizing, in my opinion, the top 3 races, but there are a number of other races that are very close, mainly down in Fairfield County, the 134th, we have the incumbent Sarah Kitt running against a challenger, Melissa Longo. I think that's it was decided by 14 votes last time, so I think that's going to be the race to watch in Fairfield. We also, if you head to Shoreline East, John Michael Parker has a great challenger in Lisa Dean. She was adversely impacted by the opioid and fentanyl epidemic by the death of her son, and she's taken that to the voters. She has hit a ton of doors in that district, and I think it's going to be a very competitive race. And finally, in the city of Meriden, a race that was decided by less than 100 votes. The incumbent is Fazzino, running against the Republican challenger Villano, who has really, again, taken his message to the voters, hitting a record number of doors. So I think those are 3 races, in addition to Cerulli's races, that are going to be highly competitive, and we're going to be watching on election night.
All right, Mr. Former Speaker, top the rookie on that one, huh?
It is very difficult. Nice job, Joe. But I'll go to Central Connecticut a little bit, the areas that I know. I think it really has changed drastically over the years. You have Chris Poolhouse going against the candidate Morelli in the 81st, which is Zeke Zelaski's old district. The demographics have changed greatly. Chris is a really recognized teacher, but it's going to be an active campaign. Look at the Martinez-Cooley race when you're looking at Plainville area. That was a rematch, and that's a race 100 votes last time. So what's going to happen there? And then down in the valley, Cara Rochelle, who's a few-term incumbent now, the Mayor Casetta. It's going to be a very difficult race, but those are the bellwethers, and those are the areas that have been trending Republican.
All right, guys, the pros and the Joes. Cultivating homegrown talent for the evolving tech world. We'll discuss that next on Cap Report. Do not go away. Good job, guys, breaking that down, huh? Last Thursday, Governor Lamont spoke at the Tech Talent Ecosystem Summit at Quinnipiac's North Haven campus. Why does this matter? Well, the governor, education leaders, and business and industry leaders are collaborating on ways to cultivate Connecticut's evolving tech workforce and train students to hit the ground with companies based in our state. There's a lot more moving parts that make that work. Watch this.
These are all industries that are going to need your expertise over the next generation to make sure that the technologies keep us at the very front of the pack.
I think the governor and the Office of Workforce Strategy have done a great job convening the whole ecosystem to include business, education, higher education, nonprofit, but there's more to do. And this is not an issue that Connecticut has a monopoly on this problem. This is a national and global problem, but I think the way out of it is through these collaborative models.
There is more to do, Danielle. You've talked about this on the program a lot. You're kind of enthusiastic about these kind of programs.
There is. I spent a lot of time, listening and hearing out CCM and CBIA. And CBIA just recently released their 2024 business survey, which indicated that we don't have the workforce skill set in Connecticut right now to fill those vacancies and bring STEAM, or STEM, if you call it, to the next level here in Connecticut. So one of the biggest things, or the barriers to that, include housing, childcare, and just making sure that people can access education and school forgiveness and school loan forgiveness and things of that nature. So when you talk about getting Connecticut ahead of the curve, you have to be collaborative, as the speakers just said on the line there. And how do you do that? Well, you got to get stakeholders together. You have to get buy-in from the legislature. You got to identify some funding in order to get these things off the ground.
Right, Paletta, time to roll up the sleeves, go to work.
Yes, and Republicans, particularly in the last couple of years, have made a big, their caucus proposals have made a big investment in K through 12 education. And I think it's very important to note that the traditional four-year, college is not necessarily for everyone. And right now, the trades, carpenter, electrician, plumber, we don't mention them enough. They're coming out of school with little to no debt, and they're making $40, $50 an hour plus benefits.
That's Simo's wheelhouse.
That is totally my wheelhouse, and I want to give the governor a lot of credit. He's done a lot of steps. He's embracing the blue economy, which is really cutting edge. He's looking at the ecosystem there. Paul Avoy over at the manufacturing, he's going out to these companies. I really believe, and I've said it before, and Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, that the legislature and the governor have to get together. We're dumping a lot of money into the rainy day fund, but if we all could get around the table and talk about job readiness, job training, the technical schools, the community colleges, they'd all be on board, and we can take some of that money and invest it in our future, because you're right, our employers need that now.
This is the least McKinney's talked in 5 years on this program.
That's all right. This really is where Governor Lamont is at his best.
Yes.
He brings the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the education sector, you know, everybody together to figure out how do we create a pipeline of talent for businesses here in Connecticut. And yeah, he's going to need some help from both parties in the legislature to get it done.
All right, guys, up next on Cabinet Report, Connecticut Day at the Big E, goody gumdrops, and Governor Lamont making one of the most puzzling food choices when it comes to attending a fair. We'll break down his plate when we get back. You're not going to want to miss this.
It wasn't the big turkey leg?
You were there.
The big turkey leg?
Well, it's an annual tradition at the Big E, Connecticut Day. Yep, and Governor Lamont hopped across the state line to take all that it had to offer in. Tons of vendors on hand. Governor pressing the flesh, chatting with the people, and sampling some of the great food offerings. We caught him with pizza and a side of carrot sticks at the Big E. We should dunk those in batter and stuff them inside some fried grilled cheese. Carrot sticks aside, we asked the governor if a staff member travels with a hole punch to create an extra belt notch in case he gets a little overzealous with those turkey legs. Watch this.
That's very funny, Tom. You really made me laugh, and I don't need it.
Good
Yeah.
All right, Governor, thank you very much. Here's the little dancing bear.
Well, I was going to say, there's no notches. It's a clip, because it's the Grateful Dead dancing bear belt, and he doesn't need it.
And if you're going to make fun of the carrots, let's at least notice he ate his pizza the right way. No knife and fork like Mayor de Blasio did.
And Paletta in the
and he's not putting any stupid stuff on the pizza. He's just having a great Connecticut
And Paletta,
pizza.
you were talking in the break, but you're a big turkey leg guy.
Love it.
Right?
Yes.
You're walking around the Terryville Fair, right?
There's nothing better than walking around seeing a young kid, you know, or with their parents, and they got this big, you know, turkey leg, and you know, it's a sign of New England, the fair season.
And Danielle, I read there's a lot of vegan, you know.
Well, I'm not a vegan.
Come
I'm
on,
far from.
tofu,
But you know,
tofu, right?
Big E's about cheating days.
Good.
So.
All right, cheating day, all right. What's your biggie go-to, huh?
Anything
Oreos?
fried pickles, fried dough, all of it.
Double bacon cheeseburger on the two donuts.
And you were at the Berlin Fair, right? All right, let's go for the pros and
have
the
to go to the gym after this.
Danielle, Joe and Joe.
Double cheese.
See you next week.
Unlike glazed donuts.
Back
Yes.
Oh my God. Are you